Procrastination.
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 So, you're procrastinating. I've been violated by procrastination my entire life. We don't necessarily choose to procrastinate, yet it happens. So why do we unintentionally give ourselves this pain? Once upon a time, our human ancestors focused solely on immediate survival needs. In those times, quick action and immediate rewards were crucial for survival, whether hunting for food or escaping predators. Consequently, our brains evolved to prioritize immediate rewards, a trait essential for survival in that environment. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and impulse control, often conflicts with the limbic system, which governs emotions and immediate reactions. Hi, I'm John. I graduated college in 1 year, traveled the world, and this is my video series on peak performance and transformation. So that means we are wired to procrastinate because of this ongoing war with our limbic system and our prefrontal cortex, and it's just these two parts wrestling with one another. So, what do we do?
So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. So he actually takes the wheel, and he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal, because I just remembered that happened.
Is the limbic system. So this is a more primitive part of your brain that wants to watch another episode of Gossip Girl before you start studying.
When I say friction, I mean limbic friction. Your limbic system is always in this dialogue with your forebrain. And limbic friction goes two ways. Limbic friction can be you're tired and you don't want to do something, and so you have to motivate to do it, energize yourself to do it, and you have to calm yourself in order to lean forward into action in order to do that thing.
The heart system is the limbic system in the brain, and it is reflexive, immediate, emotional. So in order to slow that heart system, you have to activate the cool system, the prefrontal cortex.
So you might be thinking, that's great, John, but how do we overcome this, bridging the monkey brain and the modern world? Well, there are a few ways that we can do this. Well, first we have to understand the human behavior loop, which, as humans, we behave in a very automated way. It's why autosuggestion and cues and triggers can be so prevalent in shaping our behavior and actions. When there is a trigger, we get cued into a thought, and with that thought comes an emotion. And this emotion is either negative or positive. And so you might be fascinated by this, but there are deep-seated psychological reasons in why we procrastinate, and a way for us to avoid some of those negative emotions. And unintentionally, by avoiding those temporary negative emotions, we actually create more problems in the long run. Now, this brings us to an interesting thought, that we procrastinate because we are attempting to regulate our mood, our emotions.
Psychologists started playing with what Skinner put together and realized that, well, it wasn't just the cue and the reward that shape people's behavior. Also, our thoughts and moods and emotions, our beliefs, kind of our internal states, shape behavior too.
Believe it or not, procrastination has nothing to do with your work. Procrastination is a form of stress relief. There's a trigger, and in the case of procrastination, the trigger's always stress. Then there's a pattern you repeat, and in the case of procrastination, it is to avoid doing something. And then there's a reward. You get a little stress relief.
In 1970, researchers conducted the famous Stanford marshmallow experiment on delayed gratification, led by psychologist Walter Mischel. What they found was fascinating and frightening. A child was offered a choice between one small but immediate reward or two small rewards if they waited a period of time. If they did not eat the marshmallow within 15 minutes, they received another one or a pretzel stick.
Follow-up research found that the more temperate types had higher SAT scores as teens. And later, an ongoing study of 1,000 random New Zealanders from birth to their 30s yielded even stronger findings. Their self-control, or lack of it, almost perfectly predicted their future prosperity.
One way to exemplify this is this lovely graph, where you can see that short-term gain leads to long-term pain.
That's a problem for future Homer. Man, I don't envy that guy.
And short-term pain leads to long-term gain, which is delayed gratification. But there is a way where we can trick our brain into getting short-term gains and also long-term gains, which touches on getting the dopamine for pursuing long-term goals.
Once you start to link the cue to the reward, they realize they could shape pretty much any kind of action, this idea of a cue, routine, and a reward.
Our primal parts, the limbic system, wants to have those instant gratification dopamine hits, which dopamine is released when we anticipate or receive a reward, creating feelings of pleasure and satisfaction. This reward system evolved to reinforce behaviors that were beneficial to survival, such as finding food and extracurricular activities and making more of ourselves.
Whoa, homie, what's...
Marge, I'll explain to you afterward.
Tasks that offer instant gratification, like checking social media, can be more appealing than those with delayed rewards, like completing a work project.
So how can we overcome procrastination? You want to put yourself in a state that's worse than or harder than the state that you're in, or do something quote unquote more painful. You need to put your body and mind into a state of discomfort quickly. I mean, literally thinking about what would be worse than being in this state. Again, without causing yourself tissue or psychological damage. What would be worse? Cold water would be worse for many people, very cold water. So the key is to figure out something that, for lack of a better way to put it, really sucks, and yet is safe. And by doing that, you steepen the trough, you steepen the slope of the trough, which we know brings you back to your baseline level of dopamine more quickly.
I'm such an idiot. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. All right, okay, here we go. Okay. Fuck, bitch. All right, it's cool. No, it's cool. Everything's fine. This is normal. I hate my life.
What we just demonstrated here is that you put your body in an adverse state, which then tells your brain, oh crap, we experienced a good amount of pain, which then now the baseline of doing a task or a project or the thing that you're avoiding and procrastinating on is way easier than what it was before. So every task requires activation energy, no matter what it is. If you were doom scrolling on social media, all of a sudden you do a cold shower, you've now reduced the activation energy needed in order to do the first task. As an example, if you do 100 push-ups versus doing 1 push-up, you would need a lot of activation energy to do 100 push-ups, or very little to just do 1 push-up. As humans, we love the path of least resistance, which means that we need to reduce the activation energy that's needed. Make tasks easier to start, because when we start, it builds momentum. And when we build momentum, it then leads to inspiration and motivation. And then there's a cycle, which is interdependent on one another.
So most people think that in order to take action on something, we need to be motivated to do it. And motivation comes from some sort of emotional inspiration. First, we're inspired to take action. We have this strong reason to do it, and that generates the motivation we need to take action on the thing. But action isn't just the effect of motivation, it's also the cause of it. Inspiration, motivation, action is not a linear sequence. It's an endless loop, and you can start wherever you want to start.
We know based on research that if we can get you to start, 80% of you are going to keep going.
Give yourself less time to complete a task, and you'll likely finish it faster. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. And so when you artificially give yourself these constraints, these time constraints, your supply and demand on your time, you will then do the task in a more expedited way than, oh, I'm going to give myself 8 hours to do this. Well, you will then use all 8 hours. Versus, oh, 2 hours, maybe you don't get it done, but at least you completed 80% within those 2 hours, and then you just finalize the remaining details. And so whatever time we allot to ourselves is what we will fill it up with.
When a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. And I would want to do that, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this.
With Parkinson's law, deadlines in schools work. When a professor gives you a deadline that says, do it tonight, you can do it tonight. How do you artificially create this with yourself? So accountability mechanisms and rewards can significantly reduce procrastination. Let's say you have a big project you have to complete, but you know that in a way you don't want to do it. Well, you could also get accountability from another friend. This actually works better if it's somebody that you don't like. So if you tell them, hey, I'll give you $100 by this time, if I don't do the thing. Your likelihood of doing that action is going to skyrocket. You will actually work harder to not give them the money. To explain the human behavior loop, each time we have a trigger or a cue, we then have a thought. And this thought then goes to an emotion, which then activates biological mechanisms in our body that's like, oh, do we do this? It's most of the time, if we procrastinate, we freeze. We don't want to do the thing. Why do we freeze and why do we fight or flight?
You're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. Big difference.
And so if you're inspired by a trigger or a cue, you will then get positive thoughts and emotions, which then those positive thoughts and emotions will lead you to take action, which is your response. And then this action will then lead to inspiration, which will lead to motivation, and then will lead to more action, inspiration, motivation, action, inspiration, motivation, action. And so what we want to do is we want to end up in this loop, not the loop of freeze, fight or flight, where we are paralyzed by action. And then when we do this, we also want to reward our limbic brain, our monkey side of ourselves that lives in this modern world. I eat chocolate after I complete my tasks, or whenever I accomplish something. It's like, oh, I reward my brain and saying, oh, hey, you did this, here's your reward. And now we understand how it works. You can then assess to yourself, where am I on this lovely map of behavior loops, of resisting to do the action? Am I paralyzed because I am in freeze mode, fight or flight mode, and how can I get myself out of my freeze mode and fight or flight mode? And then how do I also get out of my comfort zone so that I'm in the growth zone? Please share this video to tell the algorithm to push my face in front of more people so it helps them out, helps me out, and it helps you out. All right, now go negotiate with your monkey to be more productive.